If you see a monster, kill him. If you wait to hear his past, you might start loving him.
I think the reason the quote says, if you took the time to hear a villain or an evil person's story, you might start loving them. I think that means that if you listen to somebody who does a terrible thing or has done a series of terrible things, and they tell you about their life, you will realize the humanity within them. Like we like to dehumanize characters that do terrible things and see them like they're monsters in a horror film. But they're made up of the same stuff that we are. I think what that quote is saying is that if you listen to their story, you'll realize they're human. Like that perceptual frame, that perceptual veil that makes you see them as a monster kind of begins to fade away. And you're like, damn, they were a little boy or a little girl. They were a baby. They had parents that they were fundamentally reliant on. There were influences that led them here, there, and everywhere. Maybe they had psychological predispositions to be a certain way. They might have had a genetic predisposition for aggressive behavior or antisocial behavior, whatever. But something in their life, some kind of trauma, had to make that predisposition manifest in the world. And that moves on to this second idea of this villain's journey, right? The way I see the hero's journey is it's like it's a narrative framework or a way of living life, a way of or a story that you tell yourself about your life, that if you follow it and you believe it deep to your core and you act it out, it will lead you to the good, right? It will lead you towards self-transcendence, self-actualization, all these fancy words we like to use, but basically it leads you to the good life. It leads you to a life of courage, a life of virtue, a life of wisdom. So maybe the villain's journey is the complete opposition to that, where it's a narrative framework that if you believed it and acted it out in your life, then it would lead you to a life of hate, a life of self-destruction, a life of self-sabotage, a life of damage to others, in complete opposition to like the paradise and the heaven that is at the end of the hero's journey. In the villain's journey, where you end up in hell. And each time you go through the cycle, you go into a deeper level of hell, or you cultivate more hell in your life. And I think that's maybe a good way of thinking about it. And that may begin with, you start using people to get what you want. And because of your narcissism or your psychoticism, that feels good. And you gain an advantage out of that. And then you're motivated to do it more because you get the result you want. Or it's this kind of interpersonal narrative of a trauma happens and then you transgress because of the trauma. And then that leads to further trauma and further, what's the right word? Being ostracized by the social world, more isolation, more pain. And you go further and further down the rabbit hole into hell, into evil. And I think there's some truth in that. Maybe we could take some time at some point to draw a diagram of this villain's journey, because it's very good to go back to a study we talked about many episodes ago. It's very good to have the cheese that the rat is chasing, this good idea of the hero's journey, how you should live your life. But it's also good to have the cat behind you and know, okay, this is the path to not go down. This is the villain's journey. This is not who you want to become. So maybe we could take some time to draw that diagram and think about what symbols may be on it. Mm-hmm. And the last thing you talked about, this meaning problem, made me think of Alex Hormozy's quote. I'm going to paraphrase here, but he basically said that heroes and villains are both motivated by the same thing, and that's pain. But the hero says the world hurt me, and so I'm going to try and save people and stop pain from being inflicted on them. Whereas the villain goes, the world hurt me, and so I should hurt the world in a consequence. Something like that, right? And I think that's what you're basically saying is when people face adversity or discomfort, they have two responses. They either can alchemize that into something good and change their life and do something productive with it, take responsibility for it, or they then become cynical, nihilistic, antisocial, hateful, and they follow that kind of that archetype of inflicting hate back on the world. And I think that's the fundamental difference between heroes and villains. That's why I think the Hormozy quote has some truth to it. I'll pause there, but I feel like I addressed everything you said.
Yeah, the Hormozy quote's really good. I think because it is literally like two sides of the same coin, and it just proves this like power of responding to bad things in the right way, to pain in the right way. I'm now kind of thinking about some kind of this villain archetype, and I'm trying to understand if this sort of theory is true. So I guess I'm wondering if there's any sort of Disney movies or any sort of classic villains you can think of where they respond to pain, and what happens is in the way that they respond to pain, they then go on and hurt the world.
Some characters came to mind. If we think about Scar from The Lion King, Scar is bitter and he's cynical because his brother is the king, and his brother has this beautiful mane and fur coat, and Mufasa is the most powerful man in the kingdom, and he's wise, but he's also he's got some beauty to him. He is the light, and he is the father of the kingdom, right? He is the god to those animals, right? Essentially, God incarnate. He is the prophet. I don't know. Maybe I'm clutching at straws here with these terms, but who knows? Whereas Scar is, his coat's very dark and scraggly, and he's a smart man. He's an intelligent animal, but he's cynical and he's dark in his intelligence, and he uses it to bring the kingdom down. And he's extremely jealous of Mufasa, and that's why he wants to take power in the kingdom, and that's why he hates the fact that when Simba's born, it's like, this is the heir to the throne, because Scar thinks it should be his. And that you could say is I don't know, is that a good villain archetype idea? Is it Scar's dealt a difficult hand, but rather than being like, right, I'm going to be the best like brother to the king I can be and serve the community in the ways that I can, he turns dark and he lives in a cave, and he manipulates a child in order to kill his own brother to take power. There's something to that. There's this feeling of injustice and inequality, and in response to that pain, he turns against the good.